Last month I had a video called Albums Made in Prison, and for my standards it honestly did very well. And thanks to all of that traffic that was coming through, a lot of you guys started commenting other albums that were made in prison. And one that really stood out to me, and this is where the whole story begins as to why I'm making a video about this particular album, is one of you guys commented the group Retaliation with their demo Death from the Inside. Not only is it eye-opening to discover another release made in a prison, but Retaliation's Death from the Inside is played in the style of death metal and thrash metal, or death thrash in this case, for all the metal geeks like myself. But what really hits close to home for me discovering this is that this was made at the NCCI Gardner State Prison in Massachusetts, my home state. And I live on the south shore of Massachusetts, and since Massachusetts is such a small state, a lot of it's really close-knit together. So Gardner State Prison is only roughly a 90-minute drive away from me. So Retaliation was a very short-lived death thrash band that formed in prison in Gardner, Massachusetts, and they were only active between the years of 1994 and 1995. The group consisted of 4 members. All 4 members, by the way, were incarcerated for various crimes, which I'll give you a quick rundown of them. Starting off with their drummer, Gerald Fitzpatrick. He was incarcerated in 1992 and given a 9 to 15 year sentence for various armed robberies. The guitarist, PJ Fredericks, was incarcerated of the year of 1985 for the conviction of various armed robberies, serving a 25-year sentence. The bassist, Sebran Mike Shagoury, was incarcerated in the year 1980 after the conviction of second-degree murder, and is still in prison to this day as he was denied parole back in the year of 1995. And finally is the vocalist, Rick Desrosiers, who was incarcerated in the year of 1990 to the Gardner State Prison after pleading guilty to second-degree murder to Karen Barrier. With that information established about the inmates, or in this case, band members, the next immediate question would be, well, how does an album get created in a prison at any point? And from my understanding, there are 3 levels of prison security systems that you will find. There's the minimum, then medium, and finally is the maximum security prison. And let's state, for example, these inmates, or again in this case, band members, were in a maximum security prison. It would be legitimately impossible in any sense to create an album, as there's even more security, there's virtually no programs, and there would be guard supervision on inmates 24/7. Whereas when I searched up the security level for the Gardner State Prison online, it stated that it ranges between medium and minimum, which for that sense, it allows for a little bit more freedom for the inmates in prison. And doing a little bit more research online is that there are certain programs that are allowed in different states. And when you look up the MADOC, which is the Massachusetts Department of Corrections, is that they allow programs for inmates of all different sorts, one of which being music theory is allowed in certain prisons with their programs. And it allows for inmates not only to learn about music theory, play instruments, and even start a band, but also perform. Clearly realizing this opportunity with this program, the inmates at that time started the band Retaliation back in the year 1994. And another interesting key point about this group is that in a 1998 interview that the vocalist for Retaliation did, that being Rick Desrosiers, for the magazine Crusader, is that he stated that all the band members already had experience playing their instruments long before they even started Retaliation or even joined this program, as the vocalist Rick Desrosiers had experience with guitar his whole life as he was in and out of bands, prior to being incarcerated, although he only does vocals on this demo. Whereas the guitarist and drummer, again, grew up their whole lives playing those instruments, so clearly they had experience and skill with them. The only member that actually had to learn how to play an instrument while incarcerated was their bassist, Sebran Shagoury, as he started learning bass, I think 10 years prior when he was incarcerated back in the 80s, and throughout this program learned how to play bass and took the opportunity to start a band with these guys with Retaliation. After months of rehearsal and practice, the band of inmates was able to release their demo, Death from the Inside, on October 31st, 1995. As for the music on this demo, it consists of 7 tracks, 6 technically that are musical, and I'll talk about the 7th track later on. But as I stated earlier on in this video, it's a mixture of both death metal and thrash metal, and again, keep this in mind, for it's a demo and it's recorded in a state prison. So when it comes to production value, as one can imagine, it's rough around the edges to say the least. That being said, to be brutally honest, if I'm going to hear a death metal demo being recorded in a state prison by convicts, I would expect it to be rough around the edges. I would expect it to be ugly sounding. I would expect everything to be very grainy and gritty and unwelcoming, as this is coming from extreme people in a very extreme environment. That being said, it's nothing that's going to be groundbreaking, reinventing the wheel, as one can imagine with how limited their resources are. And I mean, it's nothing that I would personally go out and buy or ever like really talk about again. But I will state that when it was stated in the 1998 interview that all of the members clearly had, experience with their instruments, I can believe that, because for what it's worth, the instrumentation and songwriting is very tight. It doesn't feel that sloppy for demo standards, and while the vocals just kind of have like this one pitch kind of like grunt and like frontal assault with it, for again what it's worth, it's really well done given the circumstances. While all the tracks on here stand shoulder to shoulder with one another of carrying that very raw death thrash approach, the song that really stood out to me the most would be the 5th track on here, The Marching, where the guitar playing has a lot more flash to it in terms of it has a lot more moments of shredding and guitar solo playing that showcases, again, that musicianship skill that you wouldn't come to expect from inmates out of all individuals, that has some really good hooks. The good drumming on there is really well done. The vocals have a bit more of a chorus effect to it on how he's just executing everything, and just overall it was, for me at least, the standout track. Only other thing to point out here is, as I stated, it consists of 7 songs, but technically there's only 6. The reason for that is when you get to the final track on here titled Song 7, it's a 15-minute long interview of the band talking about as to how they made this demo. And it's quite odd to hear a group of inmates sound all happy and joyful and proud of themselves for creating a demo in prison out of all places. But I would guess being in that circumstance, doing really anything other than just being in a cell all day must be a breath of fresh air. As for the physical release of this demo, it was put out originally by the band independently on cassette tape, and supposedly it was limited to 500 copies that exist. And to my surprise, is very recently, in the year of 2021, there would be a CD variant of this demo put out by All Kill Music, but it's considered to be a bootleg, which is totally understandable because I can't imagine as to how you would get in contact with the band that have the rights to put out a different variant. It was also stated in the 1998 interview that Rick Desrosiers did for Crusader that apparently their demo got radio play from 75 different radio stations, and apparently over 20 different countries were playing this. That has never been confirmed, and I do feel like it's a bit of an exaggeration as to how he would get this information as he's incarcerated. Whether it's true or not remains to be known, But still, apparently this demo of death metal done by convicts got radio play, apparently. Shortly after the release of this demo, the band would basically cease to exist for a multitude of reasons. First of which being, and this is always the funniest reading this, is that apparently the warden of the Gardner State Prison had no idea as to what kind of music the inmates in Retaliation were playing. And looking up the lyrics and themes all about Retaliation, as one can imagine, it's a mixture of death metal and thrash metal and extreme metal. Looking at the demo artwork, it's very violent and extreme and very personal with their, anger towards the whole system, that the warden of that state prison immediately banned all of the members of Retaliation from taking part in that music theory program. A few years later, in 1997, the drummer Gerald Fitzpatrick was released from prison on parole. Same would happen for the guitarist PJ Fredericks, as he was shortly released on parole. And I believe technically as of now he's a free man, as he was incarcerated in 1985 and his sentence was that of like 25 years. So doing the math, he's been a free man since of 2010 from my knowledge anyway. That just leaves the vocalist Rick Desrosiers and the bassist Sebran Shagoury, both of which are still in prison today. And what's really interesting that you can search up online, I'll even have links provided in the description, is that you can find all about their crimes on the parole board that's posted on mass.gov. And it's really interesting how in detail you can learn about these two individuals, as have both been denied parole multiple times. So again, as I stated, I'll leave links in the description to where you can read upon this, because it's quite interesting. Other than that, there's nothing else that I can tell you guys about this release, other than it's just another album that was made in prison, out of all places. And I thank you guys for once again directing my attention into another wild rabbit hole that I wouldn't have discovered without your help. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new, as wild as this is. So that's really it. So like always guys, links provided to everything that I talked about will be in the description below. The Crusader interview, to where you can listen to this demo in its entirety, will all be provided in the description below. And that is that. So like always guys, make sure you guys drink plenty of water to stay hydrated, and have a great day.